Welcome to Chapter 5. We will look at food and energy from plants. Here we go. So today we're going to look at 4 different aspects of Chapter 5. We'll look at human nutrition, how America's dinner table has changed, even from just generation to generation. We're going to look at how factors affecting what we eat, like marketing concepts, like what we're starting to grow easier, and then we're going to look at what energy we get from plants. So some key concepts that I want you all to really come away with are these 4 here, and I'll expand on some of them throughout this lecture. But what I want you to get from this is that all of our food comes from plants, whether it's the nice T-bone steak that you like on a Friday night. That cow ate some sort of plant. So whether that was hay, whether that was some sort of silage, they ate plants to get that protein, those nutrients, those minerals, to then develop a good body conditioning and able to give you a good steak. So then we're going to look at how macronutrients and micronutrients affect people, good and bad, the lack thereof in some cases. We'll look at how American diets have definitely changed throughout generations because of the food that we eat and the amount of food that we eat, especially in America. Then we're going to look at a little bit of biofuel development and how agriculture has kind of led that way of expanding those markets for not just urban areas, but obviously rural development as well. Humans with food. So when we digest food, how our body is going to interact with that, what it's going to take from that plant and what it's going to give back from that plant. So that's kind of what that is, and how we utilize that to the best of our ability, or again, that lack thereof. So when you look at nutrition, you have to look at nutrients. How do we classify those? Just like in the agronomy world, we have macronutrients and micronutrients as humans. So macronutrients obviously are needed in large quantities. So we need carbs in large quantities, we need protein, we need water in large quantities, and we also need lipids in large quantities. Now, in some cases, we've seen lipids or fats being digested at too large of quantities, but we actually still need, it's still considered a macronutrient. Micronutrients are those that are consumed in very, very small quantities, like vitamins and minerals. So like the daily vitamin that you take a day, that has a very small amount of different vitamins that you need to survive or to be healthy. Well, there are 3 big ones. We use the metabolism, we use the structure, we use the energy. So metabolism is probably the most popular in terms of nutrition and how we utilize it. So that is just that it's a biochemical reaction of our body and how it's regulating the plants that we are eating, or the meat that we are eating. The structure, or the bone, the skeletal structure and then in tune with our muscles and our tendons, and how those tissues are then attached to our bones and our muscles, and how they're being utilized, and what our body is taking from our food to make sure that they are in ample condition. And then energy, that just the fuel. So that can be calculated, or that can be given in lipids, that can be given in carbs, that can be given in protein, but it obviously on certain amounts. And we measure that in calories, which we all know about. We'll talk a little bit about in class how our marketing with food, like for fast food places, they're now having to give us the calorie count. So if you go to Chick-fil-A and you order a number 1, you will see exactly how many calories you will be digesting for that day. Well, so we'll talk a little bit about that and how that may or may not affect what you eat at restaurants such as Chick-fil-A. Okay, so the dietary reference intakes, that is the DRI that it's most commonly known as. That is a guideline that the U.S. government has established to show us in the United States our nutritional needs. And so we'll go over what each of those macro and micronutrients are. But this is really looked at or compared to for our body mass, our gender, the age that we are, and then the activity level. So, if you sit at a desk 8 hours a day, then that's going to be different than someone or DRI is going to be different than somebody who's training for a marathon. So that is something that's really important to the in policy aspects, because it's going to show the people that are consuming food, which is all of us, what we should be eating in terms of science. And then obviously every food that is sold has to have some sort of nutritional content. So the USDA and the FDA require that so that people know how much macronutrients, micronutrients, calories, sodium, all of that is being intake from their bodies. We're really comparing men ages 19 to 50 and women ages 19 to 50. I just want to point a couple things out, and this is something that we'll talk a little bit about this week in class, but I want you to look at the calories. Obviously, that's going to be different. So men, if you are 19 to 50, you should be consuming around 2,900 calories. Women, it's 2,200. Okay, I want you to look at the fat in grams. Same. Okay, it's 28 grams each. Then I want you to look at calcium. Everybody needs 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. Then I want you to look at iron. Men, you only need 8 milligrams of iron. Women, you need 18 milligrams of iron, so a little bit more. Sodium, look at sodium there, each 1.5 grams. So water, a little bit more for men than women. So this is just to show you kind of what you need to get. I'll be the first to admit I do not meet this every day. I try to drink the water that I need to drink, and I'm pretty good at eating protein and carbs, but and watching obviously my sodium, but that's something that I think is a kind of a struggle for a lot of people within the United States. But with busy lifestyles, it's pretty easy to not reach those nutrient guidelines. A little bit with in class this week. This is malnutrition versus undernutrition. So what's the difference? Why are there two categories? So malnutrition is when a person or a human has the sufficient amount of calorie intake. So they're eating the amount of calories that they need, but the nutrients are still lacking. Okay, so when you're looking at malnutrition, we can take American adults as examples. So overweight, if you are overweight, 2/3 of American adults are overweight because they might be getting that 20, if you're a woman 19 to 50, you might be getting that 2,200 calorie intake, but you're lacking in those nutrients. Obese, about 1/3 of American adults are obese, again, kind of the same way. Undernutrition, this is where you're not getting that calorie intake. Women or men, if you are ages 19 to 50, you're not getting that 2,900 calories a day. 11% of American households are food insecure. That means that 11% of Americans could be undernutrition. It could be considered being undernutrition, which is so sad. And so that's something that is pretty eye-opening in terms of how we look at malnutrition versus undernutrition. And that's something that we'll talk in pretty depth about this week in class. With whatever age you are. Now let's talk about a fun subject called America's Weight Challenge, or challenges in some cases. So America is very, very known for having or giving Americans inexpensive food. So what does that mean? That means that I can go to McDonald's for lunch and I can order off the dollar menu, and I can order a double cheeseburger, a medium fry, and a drink, and not pay $4 for it. That is very inexpensive food, okay? But what is also in that lunch that I just ate? Probably a lot of sodium, probably a lot of calories. And so it's it's easy for us. And for busy Americans, that's something that's quick, it's easy, and let's be honest, McDonald's fries are pretty hard to beat. So that's something that we have kind of trended towards, and a lot of marketing is kind of schemed that way because it's easy for Americans to do that. There have been really, really aggressive marketing fast food. Restaurants go towards that. This is very easy, but hey, we're gonna save you on some calories. A lot of these big time fast food restaurants have really looked at how many calories they have, because it's law now that they have to put it up and show us how much that they're giving us, calorie wise. So they've definitely looked at reducing that caloric need because of sedentary jobs and lifestyles. And so we're kind of starting to see a different trend. For the past 20 years, fast food was fun, it was cheap, it was easy. And now we're starting to see, oh, wow, I can actually see how many calories I'm partaking in every time I go to an establishment like that. So that's something that's pretty interesting, and it's pretty interesting to live through as well. Or growing up in the 1990s. So we were taught how you need different servings of different food groups, and it was based on a food pyramid. And so you could go to mypyramid.com and you could put in your physical activity, and you could put in everything you wrote, and it would spit you back out this just the nutritional needs that you met, and the nutritional needs that you didn't meet, and then it gave you a recommendation. So a couple of years ago that changed, and we now call that the U.S. food plate, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So what that is, so the My Pyramid and the U.S. food plate, we look at grains, vegetables, fruits, oils, milk, and meat and beans. So that's what was on the My Pyramid. So again, just a pyramid. And I remember growing up that grains were always the bottom, so you needed more of the grains. That's actually changed now. I'm going to show you a picture of what that looks like right here. So this is the U.S. food plate. Definitely a lot different than what I grew up with in the 1990s. This is probably what you all looked at when you were going through K through 12. So fruits, vegetables, proteins, and it specifies go lean with protein. So the white meat, the fish. I don't see much steak on there like what I grew up with. Grains, so bagels. You see a lot of whole wheat going on there. Brown rice, whole wheat pasta, barley. All these different ways of grains, and then dairy. So you have the calcium-rich foods like cheese, but not processed cheese. You have very calcium-fortified juices, cereals, just those food groups that they would like you to have. So that's kind of the recommendation nowadays. You can see there that you don't see much fats and oils on there. So that's pretty interesting, and that's kind of how the My Food Pyramid has changed from the U.S. food plate. Now let's look at America's dinner table. So when you look at the United States as a whole, you can definitely see how food consumption has changed in the last 30 years. Even in the 1980s, we weren't eating as big portions as we do today. So there's definitely a lot of difference between the food that is consumed in the 1980s to now, and how much Americans consume. Okay, so we actually consume about 600 more calories now than we did in the 1970s to 1980s, which is crazy. And also, a staggering statistic to me is that 1/10 of the world is now considered overweight, but yet we have people that are still being considered undernutrition and malnourished. So it's crazy to think how our dinner table has really changed. For example, if you go out to, let's say you go out to Longhorn Steakhouse and you order a pasta dish, more than likely that pasta dish is about what you should have for the entire day in caloric need. But yet they give it to you and you think you're getting your money's worth, so you're going to eat it all and you're going to take it home and you'll eat it all because it's Longhorn Steakhouse, or it's a steakhouse and you're doing the steak. So that's something that's definitely changed in America's dinner table. When you go out to dinner at a food establishment, they're going to give you a little bit more than you need probably, but it's going to feel like you're getting what you're paying for. Skyrocket in how much we have started to eat more grains. We eat more rice, we eat more corn, we eat more wheat. Americans this is crazy that Americans consume about 200 pounds of flour and cereal products each year, which is crazy. And when you look at these grains, a lot of it is in a processed form. You know, if you go buy a loaf of white bread, that white bread might have an expiration date for or it might be 2 weeks until that expiration date is on. So that bread, that wheat, is definitely processed a lot more and given a lot more salt in it so that it can stay on the shelf a little bit longer.